Hey, Scary Ramblers, how are you getting on? How are you doing? I hope you're all well. It's back, it's Macanori time again. I know it comes around quickly, but hey, I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. I'm actually loving reading these stories to you, so I really do hope you're getting something out of them. Now, this next story was inspired by it's quite a famous painting, but I can't for the life of me remember what it's called. And I did have a copy of it, but needless to say, I can't lay my hands on it. It was a painting of a burned out church, and I'd seen it. I think I'd seen it on the internet quite a few years ago because I wrote all these stories quite a long time ago, and this story came into my head. Yes, it's of the supernatural variety. It is me after all. But it's more of the romantic variety. So for those of you who've been begging me to write something a bit more soppy, now's your chance to hear what I've got, or part of what I've got. I do have others, tucked away, ready for release at some point, but here's one for you, to all you mushy people out there who like soppy stories. This one's called Embers. I shivered as I stood in the middle of such devastation. The stone walls, blackened by the fire, remained steadfastly in place, their pride preventing them from giving way to the horror that had engulfed them. The charred embers crunched beneath my feet as I picked my way through the remains of what had once been my home, our home. The acrid stench of fire and death still permeated the air, and as the early morning breeze rippled across my skin, I closed my eyes, remembering that night. The banqueting hall had looked wonderful, and I'd shaken my head in amazement at how Marco had managed to do all this without my knowledge. Candles burned from every conceivable nook and cranny, casting the room in a romantic glow. The heady scent of lilies clung to me as I swept through the room, the arrangements majestic on their pedestals. 200 guests were there that night for the party of the year, according to the society pages. Juliet, my dear, you look stunning, and the ceremony was beautiful. I didn't realise Marco was so romantic, Lady Ashford said as she grasped my gloved hands in her own. Thank you, Margot. You're too kind, I replied. Marco's definitely outdone himself this time. I smiled at the older woman and nodded politely before moving on. Opening the door to the kitchens, the succulent aroma of roasting pork invaded my nostrils. The spit twisted noiselessly over the open fire as the skin of the swine hissed and crackled. Mrs. Brown, how's everything going in here? I said. Do you need any more help? No, ma'am, we're doing just fine, she replied, straightening her apron across her ample bosom. You go off and enjoy your party. Everything is under control in here. She smiled at me, her rosy cheeks dimpled as a twinkle appeared in her soft brown eyes. Off you go now and don't worry, she insisted, pushing me out of the kitchen towards the throng of the party. I smiled to myself as I headed towards the ballroom. Mrs. Brown was a real asset to the household. I was so pleased when she'd agreed to come and run the house for us. She'd always run a tight ship, and I trusted her with my life. After all, she'd been with me all my life. The ballroom, like the banqueting hall, was decorated with candles and festoons of flowers, roses in subtle shades of white, pink and crimson, their delicate scent filling the room. A string quartet played at one end of the room and the guests were dancing, their tinkling laughter ringing out above the walls. I was so awed by the sight before me. Marco had decided on a masquerade ball. Everyone was dressed in the most exquisite costumes of brightly coloured satin, heavily embroidered brocade and gentle shifts of silk. Hats and feather boas were everywhere. It reminded me of a rainbow. Do you like it? A deep husky voice whispered in my ear, sending goosebumps across my skin. My breath caught and my stomach flipped as I turned to face him. Oh, Marco, it's wonderful. Thank you, I said, gazing up into his sapphire eyes. He smiled at me and took my hand. Would you like to dance, madame? He said, his dark hair shining in the candlelight. Oh, why, yes, kind sir. I would be honoured, I replied, curtsying demurely before collapsing in a fit of giggles. Pulling me into his arms, Marco kissed me. His lips were firm and they pressed against mine, igniting a fire deep within me. I was breathless as we were drawn apart and my chest heaved within the confines of my bodice. As Marco traced a finger along my swollen lips, I closed my eyes and moaned softly. You look breathtaking, my love, Marco whispered, nuzzling my neck, and we clung to each other on the dance floor. Let's get out of here, shall we, and leave them to enjoy the party without us. Nodding, I followed him across the dance floor, through the brightly clad mass of bodies to the hallway and the stairs. My senses were in overdrive. I was aware of my shallow breathing and the pearl choker around my neck that felt as if it was strangling me. I was able to hear my skirts rustling as I climbed the winding staircase, the nets chafing my skin while the ivory satin glinted in the dappled moonlight. Marco closed the bedroom door and turned towards me. His fingers were icy against my clammy skin as he began to release me from my ivory cage. My own fingers fumbled with the buttons of his shirt before I ripped it open in frustration and ran my shaky fingers over the contours of his lean body. "Don't be afraid, my love," he said as he carried me to the four-poster bed and laid me down on the crisp white sheets. Standing before me, he removed the rest of his clothes, and my heart skipped a beat as I took in the details of his body and his desire for me. He climbed onto the bed and lay down next to me, tracing the lines of my body with his fingers, exploring every inch in a way that made me cry out for him. "Your turn now," he said as he took my hand and guided me in the discovery of his body. Slowly and gently, Marco made love to me, taking me through the initial pain to the ecstasy I'd heard so much about. Sweating and spent, we lay wrapped in each other's arms, gazing at the moon through the open window. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marco whispered, and I nodded and nestled deeper into his arms. "The night is so much calmer and exciting than the daytime. Don't you think so, Juliet?" I nodded again, not really listening to him, still tingling from our lovemaking. "How would you like to share the nights with me? Forever?" "Oh, Marco," I said, "I'm yours now. You know that. All I want is to be with you." Turning me around to face him, he smiled at me. "I love you and I want us to be together forever." "So do I, Marco, so do I whispered, closing my eyes. He leaned in and kissed me hard before his lips traced along my jawline, down my neck, just below my left ear. A ripple of pleasure ran through me as longing flooded my body once again. Marco's grip grew tighter and tighter as he held me to him. I felt as if I was suffocating. I just couldn't get any space in my lungs to let any air in. My heart began to pound and alarm signals were firing in my brain. I tried to pull away, but he was too strong. I cried out as his teeth pierced the delicate skin of my throat. The initial pain was like a pinprick compared to the fire that soon tore through my body. I pushed against him with all my strength, but I was just getting weaker. The longer he drew on me, the less energy I had to fight the man I loved, the man I had just married, the man who was draining the life out of me. When I awoke, it was still dark, but Marco was gone. I felt groggy and my neck throbbed. Pulling myself up into a sitting position, I swung my legs off the side of the bed, having immediately regretted it as the room spun and my stomach flipped. I gripped the sides of the bed to steady myself and pushed myself up to standing. Wrapping a robe around me, I wobbled towards the bedroom door, the wall being my prop in case the dizziness and nausea returned. What had Marco done to me? The thick oak of the bedroom door felt like a ton weight as I used all of my body weight for resistance in order to open it. As I did so, the sound that assailed my ears was like nothing I'd ever heard before. It sounded like I'd always imagined the mythological wailing banshee to sound. I winced as I moved onto the landing, the keening of the guests hurting my eardrums. Beneath the crying, beneath the screams, I thought I heard something else. Male voices, angry voices. I tried to focus as I staggered to the top of the stairs, but my vision was blurring and my head started to throb. "Marco, where are you?" I whispered and slumped onto a stair halfway down. I rested my head against the wall, the cool stone acting as a balm against the pounding inside my skull. "Marco," I said more loudly. "Marco, where are you? What's going on?" "Shh! Be quiet, Juliet. They'll hear you." A gruff voice sounded from the bottom of the stairs. Stumbling down the last few stairs, I was able to see Marco peering into the ballroom through a gap in the doors. "What's happening?" I said as I reached his side and he hugged me to him. I jumped and felt Marco's hand clamp over my mouth as another scream erupted from the room, followed by the stench of burning flesh. "Where is he?" one of the intruders demanded. I don't know," one of the guests replied. "Where is he?" the intruder said again, as the sizzling sound of flesh being burned reached us in the hallway. "Oh God, Marco, do something," I whispered, horrified by the scene I was able to see through the doors. "What are they here for? Who are they?" "They are hunters and they're here for me. After all this time, they finally found me," he said. his voice devoid of emotion as he watched through the doors. Hunters? What hunters? What are you talking about? You're not making any sense. I drifted off then, the sentence unfinished, because I knew, deep down I knew, who these men were. As I raised my hand to touch the puncture wounds on my neck, Marco grabbed my wrist. Listen to me, Juliet, he said, fixing me with a stern look. You've got to get out of here tonight. No, I'm not leaving you, I whispered as my eyes had filled with tears. Yes, you are. I want you to be safe. They don't know about you and they won't look for you. Dress quickly and go down the back stairs at the other side of the bedroom and out of the kitchen. The horse is waiting for you there. Ride as fast as you can and as far away as you can. I will come and find you. No, I won't leave you. I want to be with you, please, I said, but he shook his head. Go, Juliet. I will come and find you as soon as I can. But how? I just will. I need to know you are safe. Now please go. And remember, I love you. He kissed me on the forehead before he swept into the ballroom, leaving me staring after him. Not wanting to disobey him, I ran back upstairs and dressed quickly. I crept down the back stairs and out into the yard where my horse was waiting. Mounting her as quietly as I could, I left and I didn't turn back, not until I reached the shelter of the forest. There I stopped, and taking a deep breath, I turned around. The whole house was ablaze. People were fleeing, alight with flames, only to be killed by the men on horseback who were waiting in the grounds. The cries of the dying and the wounded rolled towards me through the night air. Tears flowed down my cheeks as I sat and watched friends and relatives killed, slaughtered, all because they'd known Marcus. I sat there for what seemed like hours, hoping to see him come riding out of the carnage, but he never did. Finally, I decided to keep going. I had to, before the hunters left the scene. I needed to distance myself from there, just as Marco said, and then wait for him to come and find me. He promised he would find me, and I knew that I'd wait for him. No matter how long it took, I knew I would wait. I opened my eyes, fresh tears having dampened my cheeks at the memories. I had waited for him, waited for over 100 years, but he never came. I gave up hoping a long time ago, but there was always that little part of me that hung on. He'd been the love of my life, my only love. I looked around me at this broken shell that had once symbolised the start of my life with Marco. He hadn't survived the fire, I was sure of that now. But I could still feel him in this place. I could feel his touch on my skin and could feel my body begin to respond. Shuddering, I turned to leave, my heart heavy. Juliet, my love, don't leave. His voice echoed through this carcass, and as I turned, I swear I could see a figure in the shadows. Marco, I said, and started towards it. Juliet, where did you go? I couldn't find you. His voice continued to echo through this space. For goodness sake, Juliet, have you lost your mind? He's gone. Forget it. Just leave. I chastised myself and closed my eyes. Opening them again, I stared ahead of me at the blackened stone wall. There was no one there now. He was gone. Goodbye, Marco, I said, and turned and walked away, dousing the embers forever. So there we go. A little bit of a love story, Marie Anne Cope style. So that was your Macanori episode for today. I do hope you've enjoyed it. As I've said, all the stories I'm reading are coming from Volume 1 of Tales from a Scarygirl. And if you've missed any of the other stories I've been reading to you, they're all on my YouTube channel, so please go and check it out. I'll see you again soon with the next story. Take care.